based on Babylonian mythology. I have a lot to say, but I'm going to make it as concise as possible and try to explain a few things. I'm not going to tell you the story, because that would take probably 2 hours, but I'll go over some of the symbology, but first I'm going to tell you where this all came from and how I accomplished this. So, going back about 8 years ago, I read this story while looking up a few Sumerian gods on Wikipedia, actually, and I stumbled upon this mythology. It was called Enuma, Elish, which translated means when in the height. I read through it and I immediately was drawn to the similarities to many of the religions that we have in the world. And it astonished me that I've never heard this story before. You grow up in school and you learn about Greek mythology, you learn about the Bible, Genesis, you learn a lot of mythologies, but you don't hear about older stories like this one. This story in particular is a take on the creation of the universe and the world and man that has changed over a period of about 2,000 years. The first story that this came from in Sumerian culture was around 3000 BC. This story dates between 1200 and 1800 BC. This is about 1,000 years older than Greek mythology. It predates anything I've heard of before that. What you would notice in some of the works is that it is similar to what we've seen. Like, we can identify with some of the symbols. Like, for example, this here, this is the god Marduk being pulled by 4 horses on a storm chariot. He is holding a lightning bolt above his head going into battle against 11 monsters. It sounds very similar to Zeus on his storm chariot with his lightning bolt going against the giants. Very similar mythology. So to continue forward, 8 years ago, I read this story. I was drawn to it, and I wanted to do an exhibition based on it, but I didn't know how. You see a lot of paintings that are representations of mythology that are more realistic, and I didn't want to take that approach because it's been done thousands of times. So I let it sit there in my mind, and I moved on with other endeavors, other jobs, practicing, my skill as an artist. And it didn't come out until about a year and 3 months ago, and it came out accidentally. I tried to, I was making a backdrop for a photo shoot I was supposed to go through with. And I decided I needed texture in the background of this photo shoot. So I took a canvas and I put it up on the wall, and I started gluing up pieces of canvas that I would cut out randomly. And after it was done, I hadn't painted it yet. It was sitting on the wall, and a friend of mine walked in, saw it, and said, "You should do something with this, because this looks really cool." And I hadn't looked at it carefully until that moment. And when I looked at it, it was almost exactly the same as that last painting down there. And it hit me like, I haven't been that excited for years. Like, I was so excited when I realized that this is part of the story I wanted to tell from 8 years ago. Like, it really hit me, and I was like, this is Marduk slaying Kingu. Like, it totally represents it. So I took that and I went further with it, and I tried, various studies, various techniques on how to bring this concept to life. And over the next 5 or 6 months, I made a series of about 5-foot canvases that had a similar look to what you're seeing here. They were just concept pieces. And from there, I let it sit. I knew I had to take it up to a new level. I knew I had to incorporate more depth into the paintings. And I had another dilemma. One of the gods, Tiamat, that's the green figure on the middle painting here, she was referred to in the literature as the glistening one. I wanted to represent a glistening nature to all these primordial, I can't even speak, I'm sorry. all these gods. I wanted to represent a shiny nature to them, but I didn't want to use glazes or something that other people have used before. And I let it sit, and I didn't think about it. And I worked in theater doing props and set design, and I did other projects. And it wasn't until Evil Dead the musical that it actually came to me how I was going to represent this. I had to put a metal guard on a chainsaw for Ash, for Evil Dead, and I put this aluminum guard on the bottom of it, and I scratched it up. And the chainsaw was a similar red to the primary character in the series. And I looked at it and I'm like, man, that looks really great together. I wonder if I could put this aluminum on the canvas somehow. And so I taped a piece of aluminum to the canvas, and I loved it, but I didn't like it on top of the canvas, so I let it sit in my mind again. And I went on vacation after the show, and during the trip, it came to me again that I should put this behind the canvas and mount it so that you're looking inside these gods and seeing their shining nature. And that's why the aluminum was used in these pieces. Furthermore, they look really simple. Like, it took a lot of work to simplify this story down to geometric shapes. Why did I do that? This story was written in cuneiform, which is the first written language on Earth. Cuneiform is a series of triangles, like this symbol right here. This symbol is mat, which means sea in cuneiform. Mat is a part of the name Tiamat, and a part of her written name in cuneiform. That's why I've carried this along in the figures to represent her. It isn't a radioactive symbol, I'm sorry. For this particular painting, Marduk is looking at the inward parts of Tiamat, which would be the sea, and that's why I represented this with the symbol of the sea. This character up in the corner is Kingu, and he is gazing back, prepared for battle, and his army, or legion beside him, is bowing in honor to the great king of the gods that's coming forward, and he will destroy them. And they know that. These lesser gods that are opposing Marduk, they're called the Anunnaki, and direct translation means those who from the heavens came to earth. You might have heard this from some History Channel television shows about ancient aliens and stuff like that. It's mentioned quite often on TV. A lot of what we hear about the ancient stories of Sumerians is in fact Sumerian. This is strictly Babylonian. One clarification I have to make is that in this story, Marduk creates the world, creates Earth. In every story preceding it, it is Enlil that creates the Earth. So, a few other points here. This first painting, Creation in the series, this took probably the most effort to come up with. I can explain parts of it. Some of it is a little bit out of this, just a little out of there. The symbol in the top, which looks like the sun, is an abstraction I did of the word for the heavens. And if you imagine no circle and just lines come in from those little triangles, that would be the cuneiform word for heavens. The three triangles represents the three first gods, which are Apsu, Tiamat, and their firstborn, which is Mamu. And this makes up the first trinity. Together, they mix their waters together and create the lesser gods and create the universe. And that's why there's a flow around and between them. That flow and how it divides because of that the symbol for the heavens is actually how I represent the Tigris and the Euphrates, mixing their waters together. So that was pretty difficult to come up with. The next painting over it tells a story of how Kingu Marduk is becoming, or has become, the king of all the gods. He was actually a third generation god, and all the other gods felt that he was the strongest and the bravest, so they gave him all their powers and gave him a great scepter to create all things. That's why the symbol of creation is on the scepter. They also gave him a great ring and an invincible weapon, which is the lightning bolt. The green characters around it are the Anunnaki bowing in honor to him. The next big painting there, that is Tiamat, pregnant, giving birth to 11 monsters and filling them with poison. Next to her is the consort of her, who is Kingu. She marries him and makes him leader of her army. Over on this wall, I have explained this one, but not the centerpiece, the big one. This is the climax of the story. This is where Marduk defeats Tiamat, the great dragon. He ends up throwing a spear through her belly and cutting her in half. And that is represented in the next piece where she's in two pieces. And he stands on her body while he defeats Kingu. It is from Tiamat's body that the earth is created. And over here, you'll see the earth represented as a green circle with the symbol from that in the middle. He uses half her body to create the sky. That's why there's a green outline around it. And then the inner parts for the rest of the world, which is the sea or the ocean within it. Either side of the earth, we have Marduk creating the constellations or the zodiacs, which they call the stations for which the gods will reside and watch over us. In the mythology, there are 17 stations or zodiacs. I have represented it with 15 because 2 of them, or 4 of them I should say, are combined constellations. The moon god then sits opposite and watches over the earth and glows. After he creates the earth, he creates mankind from his bones and from his blood. Now there's 2 variations of this story I've heard. One, he creates mankind with the blood of his enemy, who is Kingu. And in the way that I've created this, he's creating man from his own flesh. The ancient Sumerians or Babylonians called the first primitive people Adamu, which means the dark race, and has also been translated to the dark red race, hence the color, and also to match that of Kingu and the rest of the gods on his side. So that's basically it in a nutshell. I didn't want to tell the whole story, but you should actually look it up online and read the story. It's very compelling. It's a lot darker than I've represented it. I didn't want to, offend too many people by it. The pieces that are linked directly to the creation, which are the middle one, the far one, and then the stations with the earth. Those paintings have real volcanic ash mixed into the pigment of the paint to physically link the paintings to the creation of the earth. I got this ash from a friend of mine whose aunt or mother, I can't remember which, was at Mount St. Helens when it erupted in 1980, and she collected it. And that was provided to me exclusively for this series of work. Anyways, enjoy the show, enjoy the music and food, and thank you for coming.